I guess we can get started now. Welcome everyone to the EIR scoping meeting for the 1000 Gibraltar Drive project in the city of Milpitas. We're going to start with an introduction, then the purpose of the Environmental Impact Report, or EIR, an overview of the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, and the environmental review process, then the project description, then time for public comment, and then we will adjourn. So to begin, we will begin with an introduction, and the introduction is going to be done by Jeff Riley of WRA Inc.
Thank you, Rosalind. Good evening, and thank you everyone for attending tonight's scoping meeting. Again, I'm Jeff Riley. I'm a senior project manager with WRA. And also joining me tonight is Ms. Rita Kahn from WRA and Ellen Pulling from Fair & Piers, our traffic consultant. And both of them are helping prepare the Environmental Impact Report, or EIR for short, for the 1000 Gibraltar Drive project. Just quickly, WRA is an environmental consulting firm, a private firm that specializes in the preparation of environmental review documents pursuant to what's known as the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. And we've been hired by the city of Milpitas to prepare an EIR, or Environmental Impact Report, for the proposed 1000 Gibraltar Drive project. And I'll get into what an EIR is shortly for any of those that don't understand or know what that is. So in order to address the potential environmental impacts of the proposed project, we are working closely with Ms. Thompson of the Milpitas Planning Department, as well as other planning staff, and other specialized consultants on our team that are noise consultants, and I mentioned Ellen, our transportation consultant, and air quality consultants to help with the environmental impact report. So at this time, what I'd like to do is briefly discuss the purpose of tonight's meeting, an overall review of the environmental review process for the project, and that's going to be followed by an overview of the project description by the applicant's team. And then we'll start the public comment portion of tonight's meeting. If you could go back, sorry, where I don't have the I'm not seeing the PowerPoint, thank you. If you could hold on that screen for just one moment, please. And I'd like, for the public, anyone that's going to be making a comment tonight, that the email address at the very bottom is the address to use tonight, planningmeeting@ci.milpitas.ci.gov. And we'll show this email address again at the end of my presentation. If you could go to slide number 3, please. Thank you. So the purpose of tonight's scoping meeting is to inform the public and relevant state agencies such as Caltrans and Regional Water Quality Control Board about the project, and to inform the public and the agencies about the EIR process and opportunities to provide input. This meeting is not required by CEQA, but the city is holding it as a courtesy for full transparency and to allow the public and agencies to provide input on the scope or content of the environmental impact report. And typically what that content or recommendations fall into categories of, perhaps you might have an environmental topic of concern related to the project. Or maybe you have some feasible mitigation measures that you think would be appropriate to help reduce or avoid any of the project's significant impacts. Lastly, maybe you have an alternative to the project that you feel might be less impactful. Next slide, please. So this slide outlines the key steps in the scoping process for the draft environmental impact report. And as you may know, what's called a notice of preparation, or an NOP, pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, was circulated to interested parties and state agencies, including a radius list, a 1,000-foot radius list from the project site. Now, the NOP also solicits written comments on the scope of the EIR, like tonight's meeting. And in the NOP, we provide a link to what's called an initial study, and it's on the city's website. And that's one of the first steps in the CEQA process for an EIR. And what it does is it provides a detailed, amongst other things, a detailed description of the project, more so than the NOP itself. It includes site plans and other related exhibits. And what the cornerstone or the key part of that initial study is it looks at 21 different environmental topics and assesses whether the project might result in an impact of those topics, including, for example, aesthetics or mineral resources, land use is another, and transportation is another, just to name a few. CEQA encourages that we include the initial study with the NOP to allow the public and the agencies to better understand the project and the potential environmental implications of the project. For example, the NOP is only 2 pages. The initial study is almost 100 pages. There's a lot more information in there. So the scoping process ends on the July 13th when comments are due to the city, and I'll explain that step shortly. Next slide, please. So if you prefer not to submit comments tonight, then this is the information you would follow, and it's in the NOP, to submit comments after tonight to Ms. Thompson at the address on the screen, as well as the email address on the screen. But remember that this email address is not to be used for tonight. It's for comments on the EIR to be submitted after tonight to Ms. Thompson. And again, all that's in the NOP itself. So you have the 13th, you have almost a little over 2 weeks to submit comments on the draft environmental impact report, the contents and the scope, excuse me. And you're welcome to submit comments tonight or after tonight or both. And I want to assure you that all comments that are received by 4:30 on July 13th will be carefully considered by the environmental team in the planning department of the city of Milpitas. Substantive comments on the content of the scope of the EIR, and they'll also be included in the EIR appendix. Next slide, please. So, what is an environmental impact report, or EIR, for those that may not be familiar with it? This is an overview, a brief overview. In general, an EIR, it's an informational document. It's a public information document, and what it does is it identifies what we call significant and physical environmental impacts of a given project. And it looks at, as I mentioned earlier, mitigation measures that might reduce or avoid significant impacts of the project, if applicable. And EIRs also explore alternatives to the project, including, as required by CEQA, what we call a no project alternative, and that's no build, remain as current conditions, in this case, the vacant site. Well, these alternatives, though, must meet the basic objectives of the proposed project. So I mentioned that an initial study has been prepared, and this is one of the first steps in the EIR process. And it found that some environmental topics, out of the 21 topics, I briefly listed some of those, that some would result in what we call potentially significant impacts, but could be reduced to what we call a less than significant level with feasible mitigation. So aesthetics is an example where we're requiring that the lighting for the project does not spill off site and be designed so that it doesn't significantly affect nighttime views, is one example of a less than significant impact after mitigation in the initial study. A lot of the other topics in the initial study were determined to result in what we call no impact or a less than significant impact, and hence neither require mitigation nor a detailed analysis in the EIR. Next slide, please. So through the initial study, we were able to focus the content of the draft environmental impact report for topics that we think are maybe potentially significant and are more so related to the operational characteristics of the project. You can see the 4 key ones at the top there: air quality, greenhouse gas emissions, noise, and transportation. EIRs are also required to look at what are called cumulative impacts. And that means we need to analyze the potential impacts of the project in conjunction with other past, present, or reasonably foreseeable projects in the vicinity. And those are cumulative impacts, and that's separate from the specific project impact analysis. They're 2 separate things. EIR is also required to look at growth-inducing impacts, including potentially economic growth that could be generated during the construction and operational phase of the project. for example, by jobs created by both of those project phases. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about the process. What we call the draft EIR, that's the public version, even though it's called a draft. And that goes out for a 45-day review period and will be circulated for 45 days once what we call the administrative draft EIR is complete and the city approves it for release to the public. Now, during that 45-day review period, there will be another meeting like tonight's where you'll have the public and the agencies will have an opportunity to provide comments in person on the adequacy of the draft environmental impact report. The 45 days is also a window to provide written comments on the adequacy, substantive comments on the adequacy of the draft environmental impact report. So after the 45 days review period, we prepared what's called the final environmental impact report. And what that consists of is responses to substantive comments on the draft EIR, and maybe even some edits to the draft EIR that might be warranted based on those comments provided. Final EIRs also include what's called a mitigation monitoring and reporting program, or MMRP. And that's done, and there was a state law that required it because to ensure that mitigation is implemented. And what it does is it lists all the mitigation measures that are required of the project, who implements them, when, and who enforces them. So that rounds out the final EIR package, if you will. Now, additional public meetings will be held, as I mentioned, one during the 45-day review period, but as a part of the final EIR and for project approval consideration before the Planning Commission of the City of Milpitas. So this is just the beginning of the process. We're just starting. What I'd like to do now is turn it over to the applicant's team, and they're going to give an overview of the proposed project.
Thank you, Jeff. Good evening. My name is Timur Testimer. I'm with Overton Moore Properties. I also have Michael Johnson with us, along with numerous consultants here for the scoping meeting. OMP has been retained by Westport Capital, who owns the site, to entitle and redevelop the property. Westport acquired the property back in 2015. A little bit of background of OMP. We've developed more than 4 million square feet of logistics and advanced manufacturing space along the I-880 corridor. As you may recall, we presented this project to the Planning Commission in June of 2019. Next slide, please. A little bit of history of the site. The site is a 28.9 acre site, industrially zoned M2 site. It's part of the Town Center Business Park, which was developed back in 1983 to 1985. This was the former LifeScan campus building, and LifeScan vacated the property in 2013. Right now, there's over 400, almost 450,000 feet of existing office and R&D space on the property. These existing buildings are obsolete for the market. And that's really why we're here today. As I mentioned, Westport acquired the property back in 2015. They've invested over $15 million in the property with robust marketing to attract new tenants for the site. They've even had 2 brokerage firms on this assignment. With no success now for over 5 years and the building still being vacant, Westport has decided to redevelop the property. To put this in perspective, according to CBRE market research, from 2014 to 2020, there's been 8.4 million square feet of R&D space absorbed similar to this project in the Silicon Valley. While Milpitas has actually had negative absorption during this time period. Even projects in superior locations like Park Point and Tasman Technology in Milpitas experience the same fate and have taken a long time to release. What's going on in the marketplace, users are migrating north to North San Jose, Sunnyvale, and Santa Clara. They want to be surrounded by similar uses and with amenities. From 2016 to 2020, there's only been 730,000 feet of this space that's been developed in all of Silicon Valley. And this is probably one of the most robust and successful absorption markets in my career. With that, conversely, if you look at logistics and advanced manufacturing space, there's been 5.8 million square feet leased and 1.1 million square feet leased in Milpitas in this same time period. So what we want to accomplish today is to create an economic development for the city of Milpitas and bring jobs and revenue into the city. We've developed this project that we believe is consistent with the surrounding uses in the town center business park area. And we hope to attract great companies and users that want state-of-the-art buildings. Now, if you go to the next slide, please. This just shows where the project is highlighted in yellow. You can see it's almost right in the middle of the 880, 680, and 237 with 4 on-ramps and off-ramps in close proximity. And as many of you know, this is the industrial area within the city of Milpitas. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is the existing site right now where you can see the 446 buildings and the site is surrounded by yellow. The existing buildings have multiple ingress and egress along Milpitas Boulevard and Gibraltar Drive. And the property is surrounded by industrial and warehouse buildings. Next slide, please. This is a rendering of our future building. So we're looking from Gibraltar and Milpitas at an elevated version. We're looking north, and this is what we're looking at is the focal entry point of the main office area where you can see we have solar here. What we've really tried to do, and I hope you can notice here, and if you drive around this site, they're just beautiful existing mature trees around the site, and we're doing our best to protect the majority of those trees. And we feel that it's really it'll provide great screening for the project. Next slide, please. So the project is 491,000 feet of logistics and advanced manufacturing space. It took quite a bit of time to come to consensus with city staff, and we really appreciated staff challenging us on architectural design, ingress and egress, screening of the truck courts, maintaining the mature trees along the right-of-way, and also creating some employee amenity areas. So we've really tried to incorporate mature landscaping into the project. We've brought in indoor-outdoor patios with amenity areas, and then we've also added green screens to screen truck courts from Milpitas Boulevard and Gibraltar Drive. Next slide, please. The building has the 36-foot clear, large delivery courts, ESFR sprinkler system, and I'll talk about super parking in a minute. Something else we do, we add additional power early on so we can attract manufacturing or value add users. And then sustainability is a big part of our corporate philosophy along with Westport. So we'll be putting in EV chargers. In addition, we'll pre-wire the truck docks for future EV trucks because we believe that's coming down the road. The roof will be designed for solar, obviously Cal Green Tier 1. All the water will be treated with water treatment now into water quality, and then obviously drought tolerant landscaping. Next slide, please. This is a rendering of the site plan. So you'll notice we have loading on both sides. And what we can do with this, we can take one side of the building and we can create additional car parking, eliminate dock doors, put in storefronts, and we can meet the needs of what a manufacturer might want from a parking standpoint. You can also see that we have a tremendous amount of green area around the project. Ingress and egress will come off of Gibraltar Drive, and then also Milpitas Boulevard, where we have a signalized intersection. What we've also tried to do at Milpitas and Gibraltar, and you'll see it in the landscape slide. Next slide, please. Where we've added a tremendous amount of trees, if you can look on the right side of your screen. So this is basically, and it might be hard to read, but this shows our landscape plan. And again, a lot of mature trees within the park, within our project, and a tremendous in keeping the majority of the trees around on the right of way. The other thing we've done is we want to keep that meandering sidewalk around the project, so we're not touching that at all. Next slide, please. This is a rendering of the project, again, looking at the main entry area. So where Malcolm has done, we believe, a terrific job, and also from city's input of incorporating a lot of vision glass, different materials, reveals, the panels moving back and forth to really break up the massing to what we believe creates a nice design. You can see out there we have patio areas with amenity areas with the yellow umbrellas and our EV chargers in the project. Next slide, please. So this is looking at the project again. And you can see these, the actual mature trees here around the project. Obviously would plan to paint the bike path there that would be consistent within the city. So this gives you another rendering of the project. Next slide, please. Milpitas Milpitas Logistics Center will provide numerous benefits to the city. It'll provide hundreds of jobs into the community. And unfortunately, I can't see all the slides. So I have to get my eyes a little bit closer here. Pardon me. 1 second here. So we're going to read, I mentioned we're hundreds of quality jobs into the community and tens of millions of dollars of annual salaries and wages. Redevelopment of the obsolete buildings, and also additional fees and revenue to the city of Milpitas, MUSD, and other agencies. It'll also improve and provide jobs, which will provide a good housing balance, and then expansion opportunities for existing and new tenants, which we feel is very important. Next slide, please. Other economic benefits, over $2.5 million in one-time development fees, and that will go towards transportation improvements, infrastructure, school improvements, and public art. $1.4 million in commercial impact fees, which funds affordable housing, excuse me. $240,000 in annual additional tax revenue, and $4.8 million over 20 years in direct revenue to support resident services, including police, fire, parks, and recreation. And then an additional $435,000 annually, or $8.7 million over 20 years in direct funding for Milpitas Unified School District, funding to support K through 12 education in Milpitas. Next slide, please. This shows another rendering, and what I want to point out here is we're also going to install a green screen in front of all the truck court areas, so you won't see any of the truck courts at all. So you can also see in the forefront the mature landscape trees. I think we're losing about 16 of those trees in total, but the majority of the trees, I think over 90–95% of the trees we're keeping. Next slide, please. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the city and Jeff, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Timur. I'll wrap up before I hand it back to the city. And so at this time, what we'd like to do is start the public and agency comment portion of tonight's meeting. Please email any comments you may have tonight to the address there on below the second bullet on the screen. And any questions related, the city will serve as the comment moderator, and will read any emails submitted tonight out loud for the public record, but also share if there's any questions related to the environmental review process or the project. The city will defer to staff or myself or to the applicant's team to help answer that tonight. But now, as we're just starting on the focus topics that I mentioned earlier for the EIR, air, greenhouse gas emissions, traffic, and noise, we're not yet prepared to answer questions on those topics. We're most interested in your input, again, on the scope and content of the draft environmental impact report, which again typically falls into categories of any environmental topics of concern you may have, mitigation measures you might think are appropriate that are feasible, and reasonable alternatives to the proposed project. And again, I want to reiterate that all these comments are going to be carefully considered in the preparation of the EIR and will be included in the appendix of the EIR. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to the city.
Thank you, Jeff. So I have received 9 comments thus far. So I'll begin with the first one I received from Marcus Rangel. The comment reads, Milpitas School District needs help. A new high school is needed. Our classrooms need to be renovated. I agree we need economic growth in our city, but we all should do our part for education. Can this developer provide help to our schools? So Timur, Michael, would you like to address that question, or do you want me to read the next comment?
I'm happy to address it. I think I mentioned in the slide, first of all, we will be paying school district fees as part of the redevelopment. But as Marcus Rangel might know, that a portion of the property taxes goes to the school district. So we've outlined those in our economic benefits of the project, and would be happy to discuss that further at a later date.
Okay, thanks. The next comment was received from Lily Huang, and it reads, Milpitas needs more jobs, especially considering our current economic environment. What types of jobs will this company or companies bring to Milpitas, and will this create some job opportunities for Milpitas residents? Timur or Michael, would you like to address that comment?
Sure. So one of the things that we like to do, we like to work with the cities and their economic development departments when we have a tenant. And this building is being built on a speculative basis. So we don't have a tenant right now. We don't know what industry or number of jobs or the type of jobs that would go in the building. But what we do is we work with economic development, and we like to encourage our future customer who's going to occupy the building to work with the cities and to give residents within the cities the opportunity to work for those companies in the building.
Okay. The third comment received reads, and it's from Gray Fam. I have lived in Milpitas for over 30 years. I really like the direction our city is headed. It's growing, but still maintains a small town feel. I appreciate the work that the council and staff do to make sure that projects like this one can coexist in our little town and are compatible and are in areas where they belong. This project belongs in an industrial area. Great planning, Milpitas. The fourth comment from Sierra Nguyen reads, Milpitas has built a lot of housing over the years. It's nice to see some other types of developments that will support our economy instead of being a drain on resources. The fifth comment is from Jeremy Mendoza, and it reads, I understand that new businesses mean more traffic, and I'm okay with that, especially considering the money and jobs that new businesses bring to our city. But please make sure the traffic stays on streets like Montague and Calaveras. Overall, I think it's great to bring more revenue to the city. Good spot for this, though. The next comment is from Serenity Antonio Campos, and it reads, the area needs improvement, and I like the idea of redeveloping the site to something more modern and useful that will better serve companies looking to locate here. What is the timing on when this will be built and operating? I think it will be a good addition to our city. Thank you, Serenity Campos. Jeff, and I guess we can both answer this question. So in terms of process, so right now we are in the environmental review process. And in particular, we're in the scoping meeting process for the EIR. Once the scoping process has concluded, which is July 13th, and we receive comments, that's when preparation of the EIR proceeds. Once a draft EIR is prepared, then it's circulated for 45 days for comment. And in that 45-day comment period, there's also a public meeting. Comments on the draft EIR are received and addressed in what's called the final EIR, which includes the comments and also responses. In terms of the entitlement process, it can't move on to a public hearing to consider approval for the project until the environmental review process is completed. So once we have a final EIR completed, then we'll take the entitlement request for the site development permit, as well as the EIR for approval of the entitlement request for the site development permit, and also certification of the EIR. Is there anything you'd like to add, Jeff?
Yeah, so the construction phase would take, demolition and construction phase would take approximately 13 to 15 months. And so it was anticipated that, correct if I'm wrong, Michael or Timur, but the project could potentially be operational by maybe 2023.
We would actually hope sooner than that. If everything continues to go smoothly, that we would put our plans at risk and we would start construction immediately upon getting building and grading permits. So we would try to beat that and hopefully have this project delivered sometime in late 2021 or early 2022.
Thank you.
Okay. The next comment is from Mina Estores, and it reads, I like that the project is in on Milpitas Boulevard between 680 and 880. That will help keep traffic on the major roadways and allow for easy freeway access. Good location. The next comment is from Rick C, and it reads, as a resident and business owner of Milpitas, I would like to see more businesses come to this beautiful part of the valley. I would love for their employees to shop, dine, and live here. I feel we need more support for our retail and restaurants here. Please consider in helping. We as business owners are hurting right now. Invest in Milpitas and help us remain employed. Is there any indication of employees or support this company will support? And I think you, in a couple of comments previously, Timur, that you had addressed a potential employer, that this is a spec building and that a tenant is not known at this time.
That's correct, but this project will generate jobs, and these employees are going to have to go out to lunch and eat and shop, and I would assume that they would, rely on the retail services in the surrounding area in Milpitas, and more jobs means more, retail spending in the local area.
Okay, the next comment is from Bean Gomez Kutsakis, and it reads, thank you for saving the trees. I support this. I just received another comment from Gray Found, and it reads, thank you for supporting Milpitas School District. And those are the comments I've received thus far. So Jeff or Timur or Jim or Michael, do you have anything to add to the scoping meeting?
The applicant does not. Thank you very much. Thank you for the comments.
Yeah, I thought all the comments were pretty well addressed tonight. And the EIR will, and the initial study does explain the issue related to trees and the protection of trees. And so again, the next steps from my perspective for the EIR process is, again, we have till July 13th for comments. We'll be organizing those comments and kind of categorizing them as they relate to specific environmental topics in the EIR, and we'll likely have a matrix in the appendices in the EIR that makes it easy for the readers to see what the types of comments are. All of those emails will be provided in the appendices as well. And any additional comments that may be provided tonight or by the 13th, again, will be looked at, particularly in light of environmental issues for the environmental impact report.
And I also like to add, as part of the application request, it includes a tree removal permit for the trees, and they will be replaced at more than a 2-to-1 ratio. So would anyone else like to add to the presentation or to the comment?
Rosalind, can I make a quick comment?
Sure.
Thank you. This is Ned Thomas, the planning director. I'd just like to thank Overton Moore Properties and the other members of the applicant team that are here tonight. We've enjoyed working with you over the past several months to prepare for this meeting, and look forward to working with you in the next several months as we continue to prepare this project for public hearing with the Planning Commission. I did want to note that there's been a reference tonight to the environmental document. All of those documents are available on the city's website. If you go to the City of Milpitas website and look under the Planning Department, toward the top on the right-hand corner, there's a link to tonight's meeting. If you click on that, it will take you to other links to the notice of preparation, also to the initial study, the draft IS and MMD for the project, and all of the tree survey and the site plans and everything that we've talked about tonight. So in case anyone is interested in more detail about the project that we've talked about, you can go there and find that information online. And I want to also thank Rosalind for setting up the meeting tonight and coordinating everyone's comments. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I'd also like to add, if you have any comments on the documents as well as comments after the meeting concludes, you can email me. My email address is rthompson, that's RTHOMPSON @ci.milpitas, MILPITAS.ca.gov. Okay, seeing no other comment, that concludes the EIR scoping meeting on the 1000 Gibraltar Drive project. I want to thank everyone for taking their time out of their evening and participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rosalind. Thank you, Ned. Thank you, Jeff.